The first time my father said my name in 24 years, he was bleeding into my welcome mat. I opened my apartment door expecting a grocery delivery. Instead, I found Arthur Vale. My father, 68, gray at the temples. Expensive wool coat soaked dark with blood. One hand pressed against his ribs like he could physically keep himself from splitting apart. For half a second, I didn't recognize him. For the next half second, I wished I hadn't. "Elena," he said, "my name, not doctor, not, excuse me, not hesitation, my name." Then he collapsed. His shoulder slammed into my doorway, his knees folded. Blood smeared across white tile. Training moved before emotion. I dropped to the floor. "Can you hear me?" Weak nod. Pulse rapid. Skin cold. Shallow breathing. Possible internal trauma. Shock risk. Rib injury. Maybe abdominal bleed. My hands were already opening his coat. And then I saw her. Standing behind him in my hallway. Ruth. The woman he married less than a year after my mother died. The woman who helped build the second life that somehow had no room for me. Her lipstick was gone. Hair messy. Eyes swollen. For the first time in my life, she looked older than memory. "He refused the ambulance," she whispered. I almost laughed. Even half dead, he still wanted control. "Call emergency services," I snapped. She obeyed instantly. That startled me more than the blood. Because in my childhood, Ruth had never obeyed anything except Arthur. I pressed gauze from my trauma drawer against his side. He flinched hard. "Gunshot? No. Knife? No. No entry wound. Impact here. Maybe glass. Maybe blunt trauma." "Car accident?" I asked. Ruth nodded. "Black ice." Arthur's fingers caught my wrists. Weak. Cold. Still stronger than I wanted. His eyes opened. He looked directly at me. I didn't know where else to go. Something sharp twisted under my ribs. Not love. Not forgiveness. Rage with history. He had not known where to go. And somehow, after 24 years of silence, that place was my door. I am 32 years old. I am a trauma physician. I have restarted hearts, pronounced children, stitched strangers, and once held pressure on a severed artery for 9 straight minutes, while a nurse passed out beside me. I know how to stay calm when bodies fail. I do not know how to stay calm when my father bleeds in my kitchen. The paramedics arrived 6 minutes later. I gave report. Male 68. Blunt trauma. Hypotensive trend. Possible splenic involvement. Decreased breath sounds left side. High pain response. My voice stayed flat, professional, controlled. Exactly how I wanted it. Arthur was loaded onto the stretcher. Ruth followed. Then she stopped, turned back, looked at me like a woman stepping barefoot over broken glass. "He asked for you before he passed out." I said nothing. Because if I spoke, it would not sound like a doctor. It would sound like a daughter I had buried years ago. I should have stayed home. I should have showered, finished chart reviews, fed my dog Io, ignored the entire thing. Instead, 2 hours later, I was standing in the trauma bay of St. Gabriel's Hospital, staring through glass while surgeons reviewed imaging on my estranged father. Splenic laceration. 3 fractured ribs. Internal bleeding. Emergency intervention. Survivable, if stable. A nurse beside me lowered her voice. "You know him?" Too long passed before I answered. Yes, that was all. Not father, not family, just yes, because titles carry weight. And some weights still bruise when lifted. I had not seen Arthur Vale since I was 8. That was the year my mother died. That was also the year my father slowly vanished without technically disappearing. At first it looked like grief. Long silences, late nights, missed school pickups, eyes that always seemed fixed on somewhere behind me. Then it became distance. Birthdays reduced to mailed cards, then occasional calls, then fewer. Then absence polished so clean it started pretending to be normal. By 12 I understood. Some people don't leave all at once. They erode. He remarried Ruth, moved 2 counties away, built another home, another life, another daughter, Mira, beautiful, educated, present, wanted. At least that's what it looked like from the outside. I learned not to ask questions. My grandmother raised me for 4 years, then cancer took her too. After that I learned survival, scholarships, residency, night shifts, precision, silence. No one abandoned competence. So I became excellent. At 1:17 a.m. I was signing discharge paperwork for another patient when I heard heels crossing polished hospital tile behind me. Slow, controlled, expensive. I turned and saw Mira, my half-sister, 30, sharp cheekbones, perfect coat, perfect posture, perfect life, or the performance of one. We had met only twice, both funerals, both awkward, both brief. She looked at me like someone studying damage in a museum. "So," she said, "you're the daughter he came to." No greeting, no softness, straight to incision. I signed my chart without looking at her. Yes, she crossed her arms. I was handling everything. I looked up. Cold, tired, already irritated. Then why was he bleeding on my doorstep? That landed. Her jaw tightened. He left after we argued. About what? Silence. Then his, of course, mussy, control, inheritance, Death always invited accounting. I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, "What exactly were you arguing about?" Mira's laugh was small and bitter. "He wants to revise medical authority." My body went still. "Why?" She stared at me and said the sentence that shifted something ugly in the air between us. "Because he said the only person he trusts to decide whether he lives or dies is you." I genuinely thought I misheard her. Me? The daughter he abandoned? The child he forgot? The woman he had not called in 24 years? Mira's eyes sharpened, pain disguised as anger. "He still says your name in his sleep." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because some wounds don't reopen. They simply prove they were never closed. Then she leaned closer, voice low. "If he dies, don't pretend grief makes you family." Then she walked away, heels echoing, measured, controlled, cruel. And I stood alone in fluorescent light, trying to understand why a dying man had suddenly placed my name where love should have been. At 3:42 a.m., Arthur crashed. Blood pressure drop. Acute internal bleed, surgical emergency, code movement, fast, clean, violent. I scrubbed in. Not because I was assigned, because I was the closest qualified trauma surgeon in range. Because medicine does not pause for history. Because bodies do not care who broke your childhood. Under bright operating lights, I saw my father opened from stern restraint to surgical exposure. Pale skin, fragile ribs, blood suction, controlled chaos. The man who once felt emotionally unreachable now looked painfully human. Small, breakable mortal. For 4 hours I worked, clamp, pressure, suture, correction, stabilize, repeat. No daughter, only surgeon, only survival. When we finished, he lived, barely. At sunrise, I removed my gloves and stepped into recovery observation. Ruth stood when she saw me, then hugged me, without asking, not dramatic, not theatrical, just desperate. I froze, then carefully stepped back, her eyes flooded. I never knew how to fix what happened. I stared at her 24 years too late. What happened? That question broke something in her face. She looked over her shoulder, toward Arthur's ICU room, then back at me, and whispered, "You think he left because he stopped loving you?" My pulse changed, cold, sharp, dangerous. Ruth swallowed hard. "That isn't why he disappeared." Everything inside me went still. Because there are sentences that feel like doors. And I had just heard one unlock. I didn't sleep after Ruth said that. I stood outside's ICU, watching my father breathe through oxygen tubing, while machines quietly counted the distance between life and death. 24 years of anger had built one clean story in my mind. He left because I wasn't enough. Ruth had just cracked that story open. At 7:13 a.m., I found her alone in the hospital cafeteria, stirring coffee she wasn't drinking. "What did you mean?" I asked. She looked older in daylight. Smaller, too, Ruth exhaled. "Arthur didn't leave because he stopped loving you." "Then why did he disappear?" Her fingers tightened around the paper cup. "Because after your mother died, something in him broke." That answer irritated me instantly. Grief is not abandonment. I know. No, you don't. My voice sharpened harder than I meant. I was 8, he was alive, he chose distance. Ruth nodded through the hit. "Yes, and it was cowardice. That word stopped me. Not defense, not excuses. Cowardice," she continued quietly. "After your mother's funeral, he stopped entering your room. He couldn't hear you cry. Couldn't touch your toys. Couldn't even say your name without falling apart." My jaw locked. He told himself distance was temporary. Then temporary became years. I laughed once. Bitter. So grief made him forget his existed? Ruth looked straight at me. No. Shame did. That stayed with me longer than I wanted. Before I could ask more, my pager vibrated. Arthur was awake. I should have sent another physician. Instead, I walked into his room. He looked thinner without blood and emergency around him. Tubes in his arm. Bruising across his ribs, gray stubble, weakness, age, mortality. None of it erased what he had done. His eyes opened slowly when he heard my steps. "Elena," still my name. I stayed near the door. "You survived." A weak smile. "That sounds almost disappointed. I'm a doctor." "Not sentimental." His smile faded. "You always were sharp. I ignored that. What happened last night?" He looked away. "Car accident." "With Mira?" Silence. Then yes, my chest tightened. "What were you fighting about?" His jaw shifted. Then he answered. "She wanted control of everything." Meaning? My medical authority, my estate, my decisions. That alone was ugly enough. Then he added quietly, "She thinks I owe her everything because she stayed." That sentence had teeth. Stayed. Unlike me or unlike him. I asked, "Why tell her I should decide whether you live or die?" He looked directly at me. "Because you tell the truth under pressure." That was not the answer I expected. He swallowed painfully. "You always did." I hated that part of me wanted more. I hated that part of me still sounded like a daughter. Then he whispered something that made my skin go cold. "I tried to come see you before." I stared. "What? 3 times." Now I stepped closer. "When?" His breathing roughened. After college graduation, during residency. After your grandmother died, I couldn't process it. You never came. I did. That hit like blunt trauma. He looked ashamed. I parked outside. I watched. Then I left. Rage rose so fast it blurred my vision. You stood outside my life and drove away? He closed his eyes. Yes, my voice dropped. That may be worse. He didn't defend himself. Good, because there was no defense. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. But the damage was already done. He had not forgotten me. He had watched me. Then chosen absence anyway. That kind of truth hurt differently. By afternoon, the fracture widened. Mira arrived. She didn't wait for privacy. She found me near the surgical wing and stopped directly in front of 2 nurses, 1 resident, and a transport orderly. You're enjoying this. Her voice carried. I stayed still. Lower your voice. No, her eyes were red, but anger held them upright. He wakes up and asks for you. He changes authority forms. He ignores me. After everything I handled. Nurse quietly stepped away. Good instinct, I said. This isn't the place. She laughed sharply. Then where? At his funeral? That drew eyes. I felt humiliation rise, hot, public, controlled. She stepped closer. You vanished for years, and now suddenly you're the trusted daughter. There it was. Not legal anger, not estate fear, jealousy, pain, old imbalance. I answered carefully. I didn't vanish. Her expression shifted. Then hard, nope, he vanished into you. That sentence landed strangely. Before I could respond, she pulled a folded document from her bag and shoved it into my hand. Bank statements, property transfers, insurance summaries, medical trustee drafts. I scanned them, then stopped. A second trustee amendment had been started weeks before the accident. My name was listed. Weeks before he ever appeared at my door. My stomach tightened. This had not been impulsive. He had been planning something. Mira's voice shook. He was changing everything. I looked up. What else aren't you telling me? She stared like she wanted to hate me, then whispered, he was trying to rewrite his will, silence, cold, precise, dangerous. Why? Her lips parted. Then she said the thing I had not prepared for. Because he said there was something about my mother, and yours, that I deserved to know. My pulse stopped. Not just legal, not just inheritance, not just guilt, a secret, family-sized, buried for decades. Then Mira added, and I think he waited too long. I turned, ran not to my office, not home, straight back to ICU. Because if my father woke before death touched him again, I was done waiting politely for truth. I pushed open his room door and found his bed empty. I found the truth by accident. Not in a locked file, not in some dramatic confession. In my father's old watch. I had taken it from his drawer after the funeral because I couldn't stand seeing strangers touch his things. It was scratched, heavy, and always 5 minutes slow. Just like him. Always arriving late to every important moment of my life. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, twisting the crown absent-mindedly until something clicked. The back opened. Inside was a folded piece of paper. My hands shook before I even unfolded it. If Elena ever finds this, it means I failed her again. I stopped breathing. It was his handwriting. My father had known. He had known everything. My mother's lies, the missing money, the manipulated inheritance. The quiet way she had turned me into the family scapegoat, while protecting Adrian like he was fragile glass. And worst of all, he had tried to stop it. The letter explained everything. He had discovered years ago that my mother had been moving money through family accounts, burying records, rewriting ownership structures, hiding debts under my name because I was the responsible one. The one who wouldn't fight. The one who would survive it. He had confronted her. She threatened divorce, public humiliation, ruin. And he backed down. Not because he agreed. Because he was weak. My chest burned as I read the final line. I thought I had time to fix it. Forgive me, I laughed. Then I cried so hard I nearly collapsed. My entire life, I thought my father ignored me. But he had seen it. He had just failed anyway. That truth hurt worse, because hatred had been easier. The next morning, I went to Adrian. For once I didn't knock. I walked into his apartment and dropped the letter onto a table. He read it. His face lost all color. No, he whispered. Yes. She told me you were unstable. I stared at him. That sentence nearly broke me. Unstable. That was what they called women when truth became inconvenient. I protected her, he said. You protected yourself. He sat down like his bones had suddenly become too heavy. Then he admitted it. He had known pieces of it, not everything enough. Enough to stay silent. Enough to benefit. Enough to let me carry blame. I felt something inside me finally detach. Not anger, not grief, clarity. Family had never meant safety. Sometimes family was just shared blood wrapped around inherited damage. When I left his apartment, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered. Miss Elena? Yes. This is from the Internal Review Board. My pulse froze. We need to speak with you. We found evidence your name was intentionally used in multiple falsified authorizations. I gripped the phone tighter. What does that mean? A pause. Then, it means you may not have been the target. I stopped walking. Cold moved through my spine. If I wasn't the target, then who was? And why had my family built an entire life around keeping me blind? I learned the answer in a room colder than grief. The internal review board sat across from me with stacks of files, audit trails, transaction histories, signatures, timestamps. Years of carefully buried damage spread across a polished table like someone had finally cut open a body and named every wound. I wasn't the target. I was the shield. My mother had used my name because I was predictable, reliable, quiet. I signed forms no one questioned because I had built a reputation around precision. If investigators ever looked deeper, suspicion would stop with me first. Not because I was guilty, because I was believable. Adrian had been the real protection. My mother had buried assets, redirected debt, and manipulated ownership records to keep him financially untouched. Her golden child, the son she believed needed saving, the son she had built an entire system around preserving. And I had been collateral. For years, I thought that truth would destroy me. Instead, it clarified everything. I walked out of that building and drove straight to my mother's house. The same house where I had learned silence, the same kitchen where blame always found me first. The same walls that had held every version of my smaller self. She was drinking tea when I entered. Calm, controlled. As if ruin had not already started. You should have called, she said. I almost laughed. That was her. Even now, manners. Before morality, I placed the files on the table. Her eyes moved over them. No panic, no tears, just calculation. Then she looked at me. So they finally found out. Not I'm sorry, not I was wrong, just confirmation. Something old inside me died quietly. Why me? I asked. My voice barely sounded like mine. She exhaled. Because Adrian would have collapsed. I stared at her. And I wouldn't. You survived. That sentence hit harder than every lie. Not because she hated me. Because she believed my strength made me acceptable to sacrifice. My whole life I thought love had been withheld. Now I understood. It had been measured, distributed, weaponized. I protected this family, she said. No, I replied. You protected your version of it. For the first time, I didn't shake, didn't cry, didn't beg to be seen. I simply stood up and left. The investigations moved quickly after that. My name was cleared. Every falsified authorization tied back to layered manipulation, hidden routing, and deliberate fraud. Public records corrected what private silence had protected for years. My mother was charged. Adrian testified. He cried when he apologized. I believed he regretted it. I also understood regret did not rebuild trust, so I let him grieve me from a distance. That was its own kind of justice. Months later, I packed my father's watch into a drawer beside the letter he left behind. I no longer wore either grief or forgiveness like duty. Some wounds didn't close. They taught structure. I moved to a smaller apartment across the city. Quiet mornings, cleaned tables, no inherited tension in the walls. I planted herbs on my balcony because I had never grown anything that was only mine. Basil survived. Mint nearly took over everything. I admired that. Then one evening, while rain tapped softly against the glass, I looked around my home and realized something terrifying and beautiful. No one was waiting to save me. No one was deciding my worth. No one was rewriting my life behind closed doors. For the first time, I wasn't surviving what my family made of me. I was finally becoming what they never allowed me to be. My own.